Intellect. Yes, we're gonna go to reading 2 today. So open your textbook for reading and writing and go to page 100. There we are, reading 2, how smart are animals? We're still talking about animal intelligence. Reading 2 talks about why it is difficult to judge animal intelligence. One problem is that we often use human standards to evaluate animal intelligence. That probably doesn't work. Now, number 1, look at the boldface words in the reading and think about the questions. 1. Which words or phrases do you know the meaning of? 2. Can you use any of the words or phrases in a sentence? We're looking at different words here. Yeah? From this part, so sensory, we've got viable, we've got confronting, and we've got, there you go, discern. Exactly. Wow, this is a long text that still continues. Trade. Yeah, that's it. Okay, awesome. So what we're going to do right now, we're going to read the article, How Smart Are Animals? And as you read, notice the boldface vocab. Try to guess the meaning from the context, looking at how the word works in the context. Before you read though, we do the reading strategies. Preview first, which is predicting the text type. Now, we already know that it's an article. And the purpose is then probably to inform. Look at the title and the visuals and maybe the headings. Then, second, you skim the text to read the first paragraph, every topic sentence, and a concluding paragraph to get the main idea. Then you read the body paragraphs while annotating all the keywords, right, to get the complete idea of the text. After that, you do question analysis, and then you scan the text in order to answer the questions. Okay, I'm gonna give you some time to do that right now, so pause your video. Okay, that brings us to reading it. We do this together. I will turn on the audio.
How Smart Are Animals? By Gita Simonson. We think that crows are smart, but what do we really know? Intelligence takes on diverse meanings for different species, and researchers think we are too prone to use human standards. We've all heard talk of animal intelligence. We speak of crafty crows, clever foxes, discerning dolphins, and brilliant squids. But can we really use the word intelligence with regard to animals? Researchers are concerned with learning mechanisms and other cognitive abilities. Thinking, acquiring knowledge, sensory perception, memory, and language. These are the thought processes which form the basis for what we experience and comprehend of the world around us. The problem is that we often look for human traits when we study animal behavior. But what may be clever for us needn't be a viable attribute in other members of the animal kingdom. Animals are often given tasks based on human behavior, such as the use of tools, says Peter Bachmann, a zoologist at the Natural History Museum in Oslo. If you turn it around and visualize a flock of screaming chimpanzees hauling you up into a treetop and confronting you with a complicated problem involving nuts, how intelligently do you think you would perform? He asks. Indeed, we can easily fail to notice animal intelligence if we only look for human qualities, says Bjarne Brastad, an animal behaviorist at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences. It can be limiting if your point of departure is human traits. Animals have other abilities and can have elements of intelligence that humans lack, he says. IQ by the kilo. We often measure intelligence, particularly in mammals, in accordance with how much the brain weighs in relation to total body weight. Humans lead by a long shot on this list, and the animal right behind us is not one of the apes. It's the dolphin. Dolphins can thus be said to have the potential for very high intelligence, but we can't measure this optimally. Dolphins come from a completely different world in a way and have a language we can't fathom. Communication is definitely a great barrier in the understanding of animal behavior. Human intelligence is strongly linked to the language we use to communicate with one another, says Bachman. As long as we can't communicate with animals, it's really hard to decide how smart they are. Language is such an integral part of being human, and that makes it hard to avoid using human traits as a framework for considering the intelligence of animals. Bees smarter than babies? A group of scientists from Queen Mary University in London examined studies of animal intelligence to find out what scientists currently think about comparable cognition in different species. They found that concepts and terms used to calculate the intelligence of animals are often borrowed from studies of human psychology. One recent study charting the learning speed of bees, human infants, birds, and fish ended with the bees on top and our offspring at bottom. So the researchers behind the experiment concluded that learning speed couldn't be used to measure intelligence because humans weren't first across the finish line. The British scientists point out that the bees beat the babies in a learning test because the lab-tested characteristics that bees have been perfecting during eons of evolutionary development. In comparisons of intelligence among species, it's hard to avoid dealing trump cards to one species or another. It's difficult to discern between reasoning, learned reflexes, and pure instincts. This makes it challenging for humans to create tests that don't remind animals of their natural behavior, says Bachman. Bottom up. The British scientists suggest what they term a bottom-up method. This differs from what they regard as top-bottom studies in animal behavior research. In these, researchers pick out a cognitive trait and investigate how the animal's nerve system guides this trait. With more emphasis on a bottom-up method, they would study the species' neural networks in attempts to perceive what uses these networks can have. The advantage of the bottom-up methods is that we can find traits that we didn't know existed in animals, says Brastad. Bachman comments that one of the challenges of this method is the extreme difficulty of investigating tiny neural circuitry in minuscule brains, such as in small insects. Better tools required. There are now numerous studies that compare the cognitive capabilities of various species through investigations of their brain's neural circuitry. This has contributed toward answering questions about whether some of our human qualities can also exist in other species and help lay the groundwork for better comparisons. For instance, multiple studies have been conducted with regard to facial recognition, imitation, social behavior, and empathy, and these can be found among many of our animal cousins. If the neural paths that are active in animals are the same ones acting in humans, we could have kindred abilities, says Bachman. Gro Amdam conducts research on bees and what happens to their brains as they age. She is a professor at Arizona State University and a researcher at the Norwegian University of Life Sciences. Scientists need to develop better tools, methods, and theories for comparing the brain skills in different species, but we are well on our way, she says.
Okay, very good. Now, that brings us to the comprehension. 2 of the 3 answers, A, B, and C, for each question are correct. You're going to cross out the answer that is wrong, incorrect. Okay, I'm going to give you some time to do that. Answer number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay? Please, go ahead. Awesome, that brings us to the reading scale. Look at paragraph 6 until 8 of reading 2. The author uses a quotation in paragraph 8 to support a point she has made previously in the article. Which of her points is she supporting? Now, this is the point where we're looking at recognizing the role of quoted speech in reading. Yeah? One way that authors use quotations is to support a point they are trying to make. So they quote something just to emphasize more on the point that they're making. By doing this, they are giving the reader an example of why their assertion or idea is correct. Seeing how the quotation is related to an author's point helps the reader to understand the author's point and its importance. In paragraph 11, the author quotes Peter Bachman, a zoologist, who says, "As long as we cannot communicate with animals, dolphins, it is really hard to decide how smart they are." Which of the author's points does this quotation support? Look at paragraph 10. Dolphins can thus be said to have a potential for very high intelligence, but we can't measure this optimally. Dolphins came from a completely different world in a way and have a language we can't fathom. Communication is definitely a great barrier in the understanding of animal behavior. The author's assertion that the quotation supports this communication is definitely a great barrier in the understanding of animal behavior. In fact, this statement is a paraphrase of the quotation that the author included for support. Seeing the connection between the author's point and the quotations he or she uses as support can give you a deeper understanding of the ideas that the author is presenting. So we're using basically quotations in speech to emphasize what we're saying. The quotes help further explain what we are saying and help the reader better understand. Now, in reading 2, Gita Simonson often makes a statement about animal intelligence and then supports it with an appropriate quotation. Look at the quotations in the paragraphs indicated: 6, 18, 21, and 25. Then look at the preceding paragraphs and underline the author's words that the quotation supports. I want you to underline the quotes or the preceding, underline the author's words, the exact words that will support the quotation. You can pause your video and do so. Go ahead. It's important to use quotes because they further explain and support the ideas that we're making. Quotes can then work as a sort of an evidence, right? As we have our point, P, the explanation, and then the E for example and or evidence, which can be a quote. All needed to further develop and emphasize. That brings us to connect the readings, reading 1 and reading 2. Both reading 1 and reading 2 talk about what intelligence is for animals, how it differs from instinct and learned reflexes, and the problems associated with assessing animal intelligence. Now you get to complete the chart with examples from each reading and use the information in the box. So here we have information in the box, and I want you to fill it out for what is intelligence, what does reading 1 say about it, what does reading 2 say, problems with assessing animal intelligence according to reading 1 and 2, and other abilities versus intelligence according to reading 1 and 2. Pause your video to figure this one out. Go ahead. The part of organizing is important because it's the time where you evaluate, you analyze and evaluate the information of both texts and then learn to correlate the aspects, and from there you can come to a conclusion. And that brings us then to the point of synthesizing, where we're using the information of both sources, reading 1 and 2, in order to create something new. In this case, you read the imaginary interview with the authors of reading 1 and reading 2, and you complete the interview using the information from step 1, organizing, and from the readings. I would like you to take some time to pause your video and complete this interview using the information that you got, here we go, up till here, using the information that you got from here, from reading 1 and reading 2. Go ahead. Awesome. That brings us to the end of our lesson today. Yeah. Reading 2, first thing that we did was we went over the bold-faced word. You had to think about which words you know and which one you don't know yet. and knowing how to use those words in a sentence. And we will do that in our next Zoom meeting. Then we listened, we did the reading strategies, previewing, skimming, active reading, question analysis, and scanning through the text to find the answers. And we listened / read the story How Smart Are Animals. Then you answered comprehension questions, going back to the text to scan for the answers, crossing out what was the wrong choice. Then we went over the reading skill, recognizing the role of quoted speech in a reading, how quotes are used as evidence to further explain, emphasize, and support the points that are being made. That goes back to our P and Peel, the points you make, the explanation, the reasons you give, and then the evidence, examples, and or quotes, and linking it back. Then we connected reading 1 with reading 2, and you had to fill out and complete the imaginary interview using the information from reading 1 and reading 2. That was it for today. You did a great job. I'm very proud of you. Thank you very much for doing this with me today. I will see you very soon. God bless you. Bye.